Alert now, the White House is saying President Trump will be promoting unity during tonight's State of the Union address. But there are big questions about how receptive Democrats will be as the president continues to push an agenda that they mainly oppose. Here's White House counselor Kellyanne Conway.
The president is calling for unity. He's calling for an end to retribution and resistance politics and more cooperation and compromise. He's proven this is possible. Anybody who's sitting there with their arms folded, harumphing, looking like they sucked on 12 lemons, that's on them, not him. Because he's calling for unity. He's calling for working together. They're going to need to decide if they're serious about that as well.
Sochi Inahasa, Communications Director for the Democratic National Committee, joining me now. Thank you for being on the program.
Thanks so much for having me here.
Let's talk about the State of the Union this evening and what Democrats will be listening for. If the president uses a word other than wall, and people are all talking about barriers like the one we already have for 600 plus miles, can Democrats get together and do that word compromise?
Well, first of all, I think the president said unity in his last State of the Union, and all he has shown us is divisiveness. And he showed us this just this last month with shutting down the government, and over 1 million people, or almost 1 million people, didn't even get a paycheck. And so I think Democrats are willing to come to the table here, as we were before. In December, we put a proposal on the table that would open the government, and then we could have a discussion about border security. But the president didn't come to the table, and he shut down the government. And so I think Democrats here are serious about border security. But that means infrastructure. That means adding to immigration judges. These are all issues that I think that Democrats are willing to discuss. And let me just say one more thing about this, Harris. I'm from the southern border. We are not criminals. And I think that when
Where are you from exactly?
I'm from Brownsville, Texas.
Okay.
And I think that my dad's house is just 3 blocks away from the actual border. And so when you're talking about violence and drug cartels and criminals, that is not the community I grew up in.
I have a home near Nogales, and I can tell you that a lot of people have different stories. Clearly they do. Clearly they do. But I want to ask you, because I asked you about the word wall, and you gave me the word unity. Also an interesting word, but specifically the word wall. Because the semantics of this have become yet kind of a political game. If you take that out, and you're all talking about some of the same things, we already have 600 plus miles of structure or barrier or whatever you would call it, can Democrats reach a compromise? The 17 bipartisan group that's meeting right now feels like they can. Yeah. Is that word, if you take it out, does it make a difference?
Well, a wall won't work, and I think that that's what you're referring to specifically. A wall is not going to work. That is not a border security issue. But I think that if you are talking about real border security...
Would a barrier work?
But a barrier, I mean, a wall, a barrier, as Kellyanne Conway likes to say, whatever you want to call it, a wall is a wall.
I'm just saying it as I'm saying it. Will a barrier work? It's a simple question.
I think that putting anything that is like a wall is not a border security issue. It's not a border security. It does not solve a problem. And so I think that Democrats are willing to come to the table, but let's invest in technology. Let's invest in more immigration judges.
I want to get in Chuck Schumer here. Senator Schumer going after the president's State of the Union in a pre-buttal on the Senate floor. I want to get your reaction. Let's watch.
Okay.
What I expect the president to do is ignore reality and spin his own fiction. A looming question is just how many falsehoods, distortions, and made-up facts will appear in the president's speech.
All right, let's flow right into the president's response. I see Schumer is already criticizing my State of the Union speech, even though he hasn't even seen it yet. He's just upset that he didn't win the Senate after spending a fortune like he thought he would. Too bad we weren't given more credit for the Senate win by the media, exclamation point. Sochi, your reaction?
Well, I always think that Donald Trump's tweets are laughable. But what I will generally say about this is that I think that the president, we all know that the president continues to lie about a number of issues, and we expect no less than him tonight. I think that he said a year ago he wanted to unify our country, but his actions show something different. And I think that Americans right now are hungry for unity. Just look at our midterm elections.
Well, I know 17 leaders are interested in some unity and some compromise. And what I ask you about the semantics of the word wall are important to talk about. And you talk about whether or not a barrier works. Well, it must, because we've got 600 plus miles of it. I want to bring you back, Ms. Hinojosa. Thank you very much for your time.
There will also be guests tonight, courtesy of the First Lady in her box, and you will see them. Among them, Joshua Trump. He is a 6th grader from Wilmington, Delaware, who has been bullied at school simply because of his last name. He'll be in the First Lady's box tonight. Also, the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of a couple who were murdered by an illegal immigrant last month. Matthew Charles, the first person released from prison under the new First Step Act, will be there, as well as Timothy Matson. He is a member of the Pittsburgh SWAT team who nearly lost his life responding to the Tree of Life synagogue shooting. There will also be a cancer survivor there, a young woman recovering from prescription drug addiction, which is a big agenda issue of the president, and a whole lot more. So you can bet you're going to see Democrats sit on their hands tonight, but the president's going to try to lay out an agenda for the next year that he believes, for, at least for some part, Harris, can get some bipartisan support.